night that he was killed. Making it worse, CPS was involved. Could they have prevented his murder? After fighting in court, the judge gave News 10 the entire CPS file. At the very beginning, our Nick Monticelli was suspicious, concerned that somebody would drop the ball.
Dylan, in this case, it's not a question of did somebody drop the ball. The question really is how many times was it dropped? By who? Mom, dad, grandma, CPS? You can decide for yourself, but William was beaten to death. We want to warn you, this story is difficult, but important to hear. The apartment where William Filial was murdered is empty. Smudges from little hands are still on the window. Understandably, no one wants to live here.
The day that it happened, I was at home in my boat, and I got a phone call.
Cheryl Williams is the boy's grandmother.
He was so sweet. The last memory I have of him, I got him the Bible video. And he was dancing in the bedroom, just humming along with it.
This man, Samuel Crutchore, has been charged with killing William last year on November 5th.
Ain't possible, bro. I'm not a killer, man. I'm a robber, just not a fighter, man. I'm trying to tell him, man.
He was babysitting. And Williams' mom, Tiffany Williams, seen here in court, admitted to police she spent that night working as a prostitute. She said she knew Crutchore was a convicted felon and a known drug user. She's been charged with child endangerment.
Did you hurt William when he was in your care that day?
And I had never in my life put my hands on William.
The story Crutchore tells is William jumped off of his high chair. But William's autopsy showed his liver and spleen were severely lacerated. His intestines were bruised. He had 113 bruises all over his body, indicating he may have been punched. How was Sam acting? Neighbor Linda Hernandez tried checking on William that night.
When he told me not to uncover them and don't bother them, okay, something's wrong.
Her intuition would prove to be correct. Inside the bedroom, William lay dead. Tiffany left at 4:15 the evening before. She came home at 11 the next morning.
Did you know Tiffany was prostituting?
No.
Court records show that William was dead 11 and a half hours to 14 and a half hours before he was found. That is when neighbors heard screaming. Linda Hernandez ran up the stairs into this apartment and into the bathroom where Tiffany was holding William's body.
And she was holding him, trying to get him to breathe. And I got him and come down and started doing CPR, but it didn't look like him.
What do you mean?
That child abused.
Both Crutchore and Williams are in jail. They'll be back in court next month. But there are still lingering questions at this complex. If Crutchore did murder William, why? We may never know. But more importantly, should William have been there in the first place? Some believe William died also because Sacramento's Child Protective Services failed to protect the little boy. CPS says no way. They had no idea William would be left with Crutchore, the babysitter, which is true. But News 10 went to court, fighting for the release of William's CPS file so we could see what really happened. The judge agreed, and those pages reveal there were numerous opportunities to remove William from his home long before he was murdered. In the days and weeks after William's murder, anger toward Sam Crutchore became frustration, directed at the agency that was supposed to protect the toddler. After all, CPS was involved.
Do you blame CPS for William's death?
Yeah. They could have done something a long time ago. They didn't.
Grandmother Cheryl Williams resents Sacramento CPS. She and others believe the agency simply failed, even after warning them that her grandchildren likely were not safe with their mother, her daughter.
I called them, and it's the hardest thing to do. But you want to protect your grandchildren and you want to protect your daughter at the same time.
Soon after William's death, News 10 fought for his entire CPS file. A judge ultimately agreed, giving us 429 pages. Over the short 2-year span of William's life, there were at least 15 interactions between CPS, deputies, and William's parents about living conditions. In October of 2012, deputies noted a strong odor of garbage. There was filth and grime all over the floor, the cabinets and kitchen counters. In the bedroom, a mattress on the floor surrounded by spoiled food. The CPS assessment deemed William was at high risk, but the agency gives social workers discretion, allowing them to override assessment recommendations. In this case, the social worker felt support services were now in place to help. Several more risk and safety assessments were done in the course of the next year. William, time and time again, was deemed high risk, yet CPS overrode the recommendations, which would have escalated the case and potentially removed William from the home.
If you have a heart, you get a sense of what that little kid was going through.
Ed Howard, with the University of San Diego's Children's Advocacy Institute, says the CPS file is damning.
It's not that the social work on the ground is wrong. It's that you don't see the thoughtful analysis reflected in the documents. And it's the documents that serve as the basis as to whether or not to yank the kid.
But it wasn't just a lack of thoughtful analysis. As you flip the pages, you'll see CPS documenting William should have been removed, but never doing it. In January of 2013, domestic violence. Tiffany told police that William's father, Thaddeus, grabbed me by both my arms. I tried to pull away. I kicked him to get away. 8 days later, a social worker told them if another domestic violence incident is reported to CPS, the department is going to seek legal action against them, which means removing the children from the home. But 8 months later, another big fight. In her own handwriting, Tiffany says, Thaddeus was outraged and threw me into the wall, and my son was behind me, so he threw me into him. Later that month, another fight. Documents read, when he pushed her, she fell into William and he fell over. William began to cry. So a social worker did another follow-up, noting the domestic violence had been an ongoing issue and the mother failed to take action to prevent. But somehow that social worker's final decision, in spite of what had been written, was to leave William in the home.
Too many of these children have died this way, and nobody with any power or juice in any elected office seems to give a damn.
William's case highlights major flaws: critical thinking, communication, and follow-up. They're either lacking or non-existent in CPS.
What we have seen over the years, where I think the gap is really in the critical thinking skills of the social workers.
In a Sacramento County Board of Supervisors meeting, the chair of the CPS Oversight Committee said social workers are failing to look at the history in cases they work. She said they need to look at the entire picture.
Not just focusing on the one allegation that came in, but once they go and get involved in the case, looking at the whole totality of the circumstances around that child, ensuring that they're safe.
Shouldn't they be doing that anyway?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
The CPS director was questioned about that very same thing in the very same board meeting.
It's an error, and it's important for us to fix.
These problems are well documented, with the latest oversight report reading the same investigative or decision-making errors contributed to placing the child in a dangerous situation, and the mistakes of the past have been repeated. How far in the past? At the very least, since 1996, when the Oversight Committee was created.
Since 1996, you've been seeing this problem of social workers looking at things on a case-by-case basis instead of the big picture?
There have been recommendations that have supported that, yes.
But at some point, somebody has to stand up and say trying is no longer good enough when children are still being murdered.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's what we talked about in our last report. The Oversight Committee in its last report said the time for action is now.
Actually, the time for action was back in 1996.
The consequence of these systemic failures is dead kids. It's the boss who's responsible. This kid's life was not only too brief, it was too tortured and bad.
I have read horror stories about CPS. And it's like now I'm living in one.
It's important to note here that CPS did substantiate general neglect a couple of times, and they did submit a response reading, "Our focus is on whether there is evidence that a parent is unwilling or unable to protect children." Here's the problem. There is evidence of that. In fact, 3 different times social workers writing that there was ongoing domestic violence in the home and the parents failing to act.
It seems like when CPS is watching over a family and there is a history of some domestic violence going on in that home, that it would be automatic that that child has to be taken out.
You would think so, and that's exactly what the CPS Oversight Committee was alluding to, that the social workers, while they're doing a good job, are not putting all the pieces together. They're not looking at the history of all these cases, and they're failing to go back and see, oh yeah, there is a history of domestic violence here.
You know, understandably, CPS has said they don't want to try this case in the media, and we don't want to do that either. We're not after guilt or innocence. We're after transparency here, because without that, there's not going to be change.
Exactly. We're not trying to place blame or guilt on somebody. We just want somebody to recognize, yes, this was a mistake, and here's how we're going to fix it. Because if we don't fix it, more cases like this will happen.
Yeah. It was very hard to listen to, but we needed to hear it. Thanks. Amazon.